Would you love to hear from somebody else who has lived throughout retirement and they could give you pros and cons about different things you should do as you get ready for and live through retirement? Well, by the end of this video, you are going to gain clarity for your personal retirement plan and have action items to secure your retirement.
To learn more about securing your retirement and all the different elements you need to know, subscribe to our channel and hit the bell to be notified when we post a video every Monday. We have helped hundreds of our clients gain clarity and get on the path to a comfortable and happy retirement. Now it's your turn. Let's dive in.
Welcome, everyone, to our podcast. Today is our wind down, which we are always excited about the wind down. But today we have special guests. We don't normally get to have people in with us on the podcast. And so we're either doing it through Zoom or whatever. But today we actually have them live here with us in our little podcast studio setup. But we have with us Jay and Maureen Hartford. So guys, thank you so much for coming in and talking with us today.
Of course.
Yeah, it's our pleasure. Yeah.
Good.
Nice to be here.
Well, thank you. Before we get into like this conversation we're going to have around retirement, we got to handle the important stuff. And that's what wine we're drinking. So Morgan, could you let us know about the wine?
Sure. This is Kerner, which is a white grape variety. It's known mostly in Germany, but also it's popular in Italy. And it's similar to a Riesling. It's high in acid like a Riesling, but I haven't even had a chance to sip it yet. Good.
Nice.
Maureen, what would you say your initial thought is on the wine? Have you had a glass yet or a sip yet? Not a glass yet.
It's crisper than most Rieslings. I like it.
Yeah. I'll have to try it.
So let me kind of give a little bit of a setup here as to why we reached out to Maureen and Jay about coming in. Is, Merce and I, in our practice, we work with individuals that are within 10 years of retirement and all the way through retirement. So we talk about all these things that you got to do to get ready for retirement. And then there's lots of things you got to do throughout to have a good, successful retirement. But the real important stuff is that stuff you do probably within that 10-year range of retirement. And so we were having a conversation one day with Jay in particular, and he said, I'm way down the road in retirement. And so we said, wait a minute, that'd be a great episode is we can talk to somebody who's been retired for some time and maybe get a little bit of their insights. Let me ask you this. What year did you retire, Jay?
I retired in 1999 when we moved down here from Michigan.
So 1999. So when we're recording this, that's like almost 22 years of retirement. Oh, that's great. And then Maureen, when did you retire?
I retired in 2011.
So you're sitting on 10 years of retirement. So can we kind of go back in time a little bit, if you don't mind, and kind of give us what you went through, maybe some of the steps that you started thinking about before you actually made that commitment to say, I'm going to retire, and some of the thought processes that you went through, and maybe as you think back on that and share that story with us, maybe anything that you could share of mistakes or positives or whatever it might be.
I think the first thing that we started thinking about was where are you going to live? Where do you think you want to move to when you retire? And that seems to occupy a lot of people's minds, in addition to the other things that they ought to be doing. But we were looking at Hilton Head. Maureen turned 50 and we went to Hilton Head for her birthday and we fell in love with the place. And so we thought, oh, this is going to be great. We're going to move to a nice warm climate. It's a beautiful place. We got all wrapped up in it. We joined a country club. We bought a boat. We were going to live the high life. We bought a condo. We later traded that condo in on, I don't know exactly how this worked, but we got the attorneys together and we traded it in on a nice house right there on Braddock Cove, which is right near a place that a lot of people have heard of, the Salty Dog. You see those T-shirts on?
Oh, I've got the T-shirt.
Yeah. Do you have the T-shirt? Yeah.
It definitely doesn't fit anymore, but I have the T-shirt.
Yeah. But so that's what we decided. And so we lived there for about almost 10 years, not lived there, but vacationed there. And it's at that time that we ran into trouble. Okay. After we had decided that was where we're going to live, we began to realize the 2008 crisis hit. This isn't going to work out as well. Prices have gone crazy on homes. They've dropped precipitously. All kinds of things. The flood insurance was going skyrocketing. And so that was going to impact our finances.
And Jay worried about hurricanes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I didn't like the idea of hurricanes visiting us. So anyway, a lesson for people is you better be prepared to change your plans. You better be agile, and you better think about things carefully as you go along, because you're probably going to want to adjust.
And things that sound wonderful when you're working, very laid back environment, not much happening, go to the beach, don't have the same appeal when you don't have to go to work. I mean, it's like people still say to me, well, what are you going to do for the weekend? I'm like, the weekend isn't really much different than the week.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And that mentality, we actually lived down there for 4 months, and it was like, what are we going to do today?
Yeah.
There was
Yeah.
no life of the mind there, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
There wasn't NC State and Carolina and Duke doing programs.
And we watched it, the traffic grow substantially. The place changed over time. Traffic was awful. I mean, at 5 to 8 in the morning, all the people that were taking care of the homes, either construction or the maintenance type people, or the restaurant workers, those people were in a giant traffic jam in the morning trying to get on the island, and a giant traffic jam at night trying to get off the island. And the whole place just sort of changed. And we said, this isn't going to work. And we started to pay more attention in healthcare too. Healthcare is a big issue for retirees. So anyway, that's.
Yeah. So I think this is great, because Braden and I, we talk all the time about, when we're talking about these retirement financial plans and how we build these out, we never say that they're set in stone.
Yeah.
And we oftentimes say that, hey, when you do retire, it's going to take a few years before you actually feel like you're comfortable in retirement, whether that's figuring out your expenses or figuring out where you want to be, or figuring out what you want to do. That takes quite a bit of time. So how did you decide then to, I guess, stay in Raleigh? Or was it you were moving down to Raleigh, or you were already in Raleigh at this point?
We were already in Raleigh.
Yeah. So other than the fact that I would say it's one of the best cities in the country, and even more so now than back then, what was the drawing factor, rather than looking at, maybe the West Coast or something like that?
I think there were two biggies, and that's one is healthcare. This area has probably some of the best healthcare in the nation. I mean, with 3 different hospitals competing with each other, Duke, UNC, and it's a big, huge issue, and it's great here for healthcare. And then there's also the people and the what's the word? The
It's a social environment, I think.
social, but also the entertainment.
Mm.
It's more than just entertainment. I mean, it's got the Museum of Art. It's got culture. It's a lot of really, really smart people here that have decided to stay here, and that's a big difference. That's a huge difference.
I think the life of the mind, as I mentioned before, you can't underestimate that in retirement. I mean, keeping you intellectually engaged is important. And you have to find ways to make that happen.
Yeah, we were talking just briefly before we started this discussion, and I think something that we talk about a lot with folks is, sometimes people go into this idea of I'm going to retire, but then they retire and they go, well, now what am I going to do? You kind of mentioned that earlier, like, I don't really have the things to do that I was doing before when I was working. So now life is different. I know with you two that you did decide after retirement to do a consulting type business, I guess.
We
And
did.
you went down. So could you tell us kind of how that, like, maybe the why and maybe even a pros and cons of that, if there are any?
We had a colleague, and in fact, he was on my board, and he was doing presidential searches for colleges. And he first asked Jay to join him. And then when I retired, he asked me to join him. So the 3 of us formed a small company, and he was getting tired of traveling. So we did more of the traveling. And we did it for about 6 years. And it was fun. It kept us connected with people. We could do a lot of the work from our home office and travel to meet boards. It was fun. And then the boards got really political and it became less
Yeah,
fun.
It became less fun. We closed it down in 2017.
17. Yeah.
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 It became much less fun. And so we decided to get out of it.
And we didn't really, it wasn't for the money. It was sort of for the staying connected to colleagues.
Yeah.
I
And the
like that.
travel.
And the travel, I was gonna
Visited some
say.
really interesting places.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was good. Yeah, it was good.
Yeah, we do see that all the time. Someone could work, for a company for years and years and years, and then they build up this group of connections that they've gotten, whether they were in a situation where they got laid off or whether they just decided I'm going to retire early. And then they retire and they're like, well, I don't like retirement. I'm going to go back and use my skill set, but they do a consulting job rather than trying to go find another W-2 type of job. And oftentimes it works out that they end up making a little bit more than they were, or they have a way more flexible schedule than they did. And they're ultimately a little bit happier. And then, like you guys said, you kind of call the shots. Hey, this has run its course and now we're going to shut it down. And now we're going to hit that next phase of retirement. So what's the next phase of retirement look like for you guys since you've shut it down and you're not so involved in the consulting work that you did? I know we talked to you guys a couple months, maybe a month ago, about a massive trip that you guys took, and we don't need to get down into the details about it, but
Yeah.
what's going on since you shut down the company?
We do travel.
Yeah, we
and-
do like to travel.
And somebody will frequently say, oh, I'm not interested. But if I put the details together, he gets interested.
Yeah, I-
We've done a lot
Yeah.
of cruises. We're now focusing on hiking in the national parks and even the state parks. We just spent a day up at Hanging Rock State Park, which is interesting because it's very vertical.
Yeah.
It's
yeah,
not a flat
yeah.
hike. And it adds to the benefit. It keeps us more in shape so that we're able to enjoy things like that.
We combined a trip to go to Seattle also to see a granddaughter graduate, and decided to stay there for 5 days, but then to go to Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and visit that place. And it's gorgeous and fun. And then we went to
We did the state parks, the national, the Tetons and the Yellowstone.
Yellowstone, had 6 inches of snow at Yellowstone in May.
So we got
Oh,
to
wow.
see
Yeah,
the.
it's hard to, by the way, take a cardboard box and scrape snow off your car.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, and then we drove out of the park and we drove 1,500 miles to South Dakota, and really had fun there, Rapid City, and we spent quite a bit of time there, and then flew home. And that was a great trip. That was a lot of fun.
Our next trip is a cruise. so
Oh, fantastic.
We're trying, we think.
Oh, good.
We think.
Yeah.
So I got a question for you that, and this is not uncommon, by the way, because of who we work with, to see this, I would say, very often. But based on what you said, is that you retired, Jay, I guess it was about 12 years prior to Maureen. So could you tell us a little bit about how that dynamic is? One retires, the other one's not retired. They're still working. Maybe how that was, and maybe some advice for our listeners that might be going down that path.
Well, one of the big reasons, I had several bouts with cancer, so I was ready to retire. I just said, yeah, when we left Michigan, I said, I'm going to retire. But the other thing, the circumstances were really interesting because I became the first gentleman at Meredith State College.
Meredith College.
And I used to interact with the board, and I would spend time with the business people, and then there was a lot of entertaining. And then, of course, there was a lot of golf to play. Somebody had to do it.
You poor thing.
Yeah,
Somebody
poor
had to
thing.
do it,
So
yeah.
we actually had a ball. We lived in that great big house. We didn't have to do anything. The maintenance was all taken care of. Maureen enjoyed the job. Yeah.
I did.
And so the circumstances are kind of different. And I was very active. So it worked out really well. We probably had fewer arguments then than we did we do now.
The hardest thing, we share an office. We have a partner desk. And there are times when I want a wall that I can just close. And it was
Yeah.
awful when we were consulting. It's like he would be, can you do this? Can you? I'm like, not your secretary. I'm your partner.
Yeah. That was a trial.
I'm still the tech support
Yeah.
in the house, which is a
Yeah.
problem.
Oh, wow.
I think another thing for people to think about as they're preparing is, what are your social networks that will continue once you stop working? Because so many of us are so vested in our work that we don't have contacts outside of work. And when you retire and everybody else that you interact with is still working, the dynamics change.
Right.
Yeah.
So what do you put together? I mean, and it's not something that can happen by accident. You have to work on developing relationships and people that you connect with. So I got very involved in working at Rex Hospital as a volunteer, and my dog and I are a therapy team at Rex, and that's been a really good experience for me. And Jay volunteered there too. So
Yeah, I was an escort for about 6 years, and that was enjoyable. You meet a lot of people, you take them to different places in the hospital. You get lost wandering around. You know, it was fun.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it.
And yeah, I'm in 2 book clubs, a card group, a golf group, and then do the work at the hospital. So I stay pretty busy.
Well,
Yeah.
well, I think that's great. And so that was a great piece of advice. And so for our average listener, they're kind of in that zone of either they're right at retirement or they're getting close to retirement. So you guys have done a fantastic job. And you, like Jay said a long time ago, you're well into it, and more than not, you figured it out and you're enjoying it to a great degree. So if you were to say, look back in your early 50s, mid 50s, your 60s, is there any advice that you've got out there for someone that is approaching that age or approaching that decision, as things to think about or things that you guys wish you may have done differently? Anything out there that you could provide for us?
I think one thing is we prepared some estate plans, and we did it because we were working with a bank, for instance, and I didn't think they did a very good job. And I even think our personal attorney did one for us, and that really didn't cover the bases as it should have. And so it wasn't until we worked with you guys that you had somebody that you recommended, and they do a whale of a good job. And so I would get somebody that's definitely an estate attorney to address your problems. And I would do that sooner than we did. That's something you probably want to start thinking about pretty quickly. That's really important. And the healthcare part of it is really important. And there's one element of that healthcare problem that is overlooked. And that's a thing called MOST. And it's a medical orders for scope of treatment after you hit an emergency room. And we learned that you need to have that with your physician, and you need to have it on your chest when you get in the ambulance so that people know what it is you want. Do not resuscitate, or do you want to be resuscitated? What is it you want? What is it you don't want? And you clearly have that readily available when you have to go to the hospital. If you can't speak, you don't want to get in. And even if you can speak, you don't want to get in an ethical argument with the physician who wants to keep people alive versus what you may want. And
that's very
important.
interesting. Yeah. You know why? Because I just took my mom to the hospital. She had a scenario. My mom's 83.
Yeah.
And I took her to the hospital, and I'd never had, and I thought, so what's funny is my mom, I support and work with her quite a bit. But anyway, we go in, and the doctor, my mom was not in any kind of bad condition that way. She just had a couple of scenarios. But so it was not a bad ordeal that we were there. It was just something we need to have checked out. And the doctor says, Mrs. Stansel, if something happens, do you, and we need to, do you want us to resuscitate you? And I had never heard that question. My mom looked at me and she goes, well, Raiden, what do you think? And I'm like, I'm not answering this question. I'm like, I'm like,
That's right.
what am I supposed to say? Mom, yeah, don't resuscitate her. Whatever you do,
That's
just let her.
exactly right.
Just
go.
let her
Yeah.
go. And I'm like, no, I said, Mom, I said, I think yes. I said, unless there's something here bigger, let's go ahead and resuscitate her. And my mom was like, thank you. I love you too, Raiden.
Yeah. People don't realize though that usually that estate plan and that healthcare document is somewhere in your trunk or someplace so that when you hit the hospital, that's not accessible. And the doctors win the argument generally if you're not careful. Anyway.
The other thing I would say is it's in your 50s and 60s that you should be buying long-term health insurance and
Or earlier.
or earlier. Yeah. It's astonishing how much care costs. My mother was in a care home. She did not have long-term health care insurance, and it was $10,000 a month. You think of, even if people have a fair amount put aside, if you were in for years, how long that would last. So, yeah, it's an important decision to make, and people are living longer. You really need to think about if you get it young enough, it's not that expensive.
So we were just having a conversation with a client about how, like, housing in all essence. This person was looking at what's called a CCRC, a continuous care retirement community. We had a conversation with some folks that do retirement planning from like a living perspective, not financial, like what we
Right.
do. And they said the number one thing is that they find that people need to really talk about, decide what they want to do is housing. What
Yeah.
are you going to do? So now that you're into retirement for some years, what has been your conversation around, I guess, housing and where you're going to live, and what's your thoughts on that?
One of the first traps you get into is answering the question, well, where do you want to die? You want to die in your home, or do you want to die in some healthcare facility? I've got a fear of being in a nursing home. That scares the daylights out of me. So I'd be the first one to say, don't resuscitate. I think, a good way to go would be a heart attack rather than a nursing home. And now I forget the question you asked.
Where you would live.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
have you talked about, like, when I talk about housing, what I'm saying is, like, some people say, I don't want to be in a 2-story home anymore. I want to
Right.
be in a ranch, or I
Yeah.
want to have this type of, I want low maintenance. I want to make sure that we don't have to have the yard care, or whatever those things might be. I'm curious, as you've built throughout this retirement, like, what's been your conversation around housing?
We've talked a lot. In fact, when my mother passed away, we talked about when she started downhill was when she fell down steps. And we looked at each other, and we had a massive flight of steps, and we had big high ceilings and just a giant dramatic stairway. And we looked at it and went, yeah, that's not going to work.
That's not gonna work, yeah.
So we, just 2 years ago, we moved into a brand new ranch, everything on one level. And that was a good decision. And the Homeowners Association takes care of the yard and the shrubs. So it's not quite totally maintenance free, but it's much closer than we were before.
Yeah.
And our next step is we're looking at a CCRC also.
Yeah.
For me, it feels like a big commitment because I'm 73 and my mother lived to be 93. My grandmother lived to be 99. I could be talking about 25 years somewhere. So that's a bigger commit that most people think about when they're moving into one of those. So.
I had both of my parents die of heart attacks. My dad at 57, my mother at 78. So I don't share that same view. It's yeah. I feel like I'm ready to go out the door at any moment.
Well, because of the day that we live in, and the medical care that we have, and the technology that we have that we didn't have back when your parents passed, they say don't you can't
Yeah.
really base it off of your
Yeah,
parents
you're right.
anymore. And you're key to that. You're way past
Right.
their age.
Yeah,
And so you know, these are things that we have to plan for, and sometimes they're not fun conversations. Sometimes they're, you know, they can put a little bit of strain between us because one wants one thing and the other wants the other thing. But the client we just talked to said, yeah, we had that same issue. One wanted to go into the CCRC. The other said, I just don't want to be in it at all because it has this stigma of eventually we're going to be in assisted living.
Right.
Yeah.
But eventually they kind of worked through it and said, okay, well, now they eventually said, yes, this makes sense. And then that conversation was covered. And now it's like, okay, well, now what do we do? Where do we go?
Yes.
And so I think that the moral is you take things one step at a time,
And things change.
and things
Yeah,
change
and things
all
change.
the time. So,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think I think one of the things I would say to people getting closer to retirement is, you know, what are your goals for retirement? I mean, some people think they might want to run a book or start a totally new career or climb all the major mountains in North America. But it helps if you sort of write that down and begin to plan for it. We didn't have that ambitious a goal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Our goals were pretty simple. We wanted to enjoy retirement with financial security. We wanted to travel and be active, and we wanted to make sure that as we got older, we weren't a burden to our kids. You know, that's the commitment we made to them, is you're not going to have to worry about us financially as we get older.
It's one of the tough parts of this is actually having a really good conversation with the kids. And that's really hard for some people. They don't want to talk about this, and the kids don't want to talk about it. And it's a really important piece of it. You've got to level with them. You've got to be honest. You've got to talk about it. And that's missed by a lot of people.
And-
There's some good books about that, by the way. I've got one right here that I've got a friend that's dying of cancer. And so this is a book about the great beyond and how you plan for it. So I picked up the book so I could have a conversation with him. And it's really good, particularly about the emotional part of it. And so later, that's something, you know,
What's the title of the book?
it's this is one of many, by the way, that are out there, but this is Jane Brody's Guide to the Great Beyond. And it's not only a practical primer on preparing medically and legally, but it's also emotionally, you know, how you get the family together and actually have a discussion about that.
Starting those conversations that nobody really wants to have.
Yeah, they don't want to, they don't want to talk about it. Yeah.
And I think too that for us, finding you all was a great boon to us,
It was.
because Jay was tearing his hair out. He used to have a lot more hair
Yeah. Yeah.
doing the investments himself. And I mean, he would wake up in the middle of the night and be worried about, and we were investing in individual stocks. Some we knew, some we didn't. Being able to pass that on to you and say, you're going to take care of it, and we don't have to worry about it as intensely anymore. That makes
Yeah.
for a calmer retirement.
I did have a couple of good ones. One was being an angel investor in a thing called Bluegill when we were in Michigan. And Bluegill turned into be sold to CheckFree and is the basis for a lot of the online checking that you're able to do and so on. So that was a goodie. We just wish we'd put more money into it. Yeah.
We got about, I think we invested 25,000, and 18 months later, when they sold, we got about 400,000.
Wow.
So
It's
we
like,
had
that was our big
boat.
mistake. We should have put 100,000.
We had a boat named Bluegill.
That's good.
Yeah.
Well, I just want you to know that, you know, we feel that this is extremely valuable just to talk about these things, because a lot of times people, you know, they're scared. I mean, people are worried about these things, and you guys were able to share with us just your story. I mean, it's not like a scenario that we get to hear a lot. So thank you so very much for coming on and talking to
Yeah,
us.
It was
Thanks
our
for
pleasure.
taking care of
Yeah.
our resources.
All right.
Yeah. Thank you.
We hope this video has given you some confidence and clarity as you plan for a worry-free life in retirement. But what else do you need? We have created a complimentary video course called 3 Keys to Secure Your Retirement. This video walks you through step by step what you need to do to get ready for retirement. You can also check out our podcast called Secure Your Retirement. You can subscribe below.
For more retirement tips, watch this video, Create Your Retirement Income Plan. Also, click here to subscribe to our podcast, Secure Your Retirement. If you like this video, hit the like button and be sure to subscribe and share it with your friends.